Sagittarius, in the house where you live, a tall man is coming. Sometimes it happens not with noise or chaos, but with a subtle shift that only your spirit can sense. This is not about a stranger barging into your life, but about an old presence, an echo of a story you thought had ended, finding its way back to your doorway. For you, Sagittarius, ruled by Jupiter's vast sky and eternal search for meaning, this moment is not random. It is destiny shaping itself into form, showing up as someone familiar, someone tall, someone carrying both the shadow and the lesson you once believed you had left behind. Yet here they are, not to undo your growth but to mirror it. This is not about fear, nor is it about losing ground. It is about seeing clearly just how far you've come. Because when destiny knocks, it does not come to test your strength. It comes to remind you that you already hold it. So take a breath, settle into this space with me, and let us walk together through the layers of this unfolding. If these words resonate, stay close, like, share, and subscribe to this channel. Not because I ask it, but because somewhere deep down your soul is ready to hear its own story reflected back. Gate 1. Sagittarius, the figure that approaches your life now is not merely a person. It is a living reminder of the journey you once walked, the road that shaped you into who you are today. Imagine it this way. When a tall man appears at your door, he is not just flesh and bone, but the embodiment of a memory that once unsettled your spirit. He carries with him echoes of unfinished conversations, emotions you once buried in silence, and lessons that your soul demanded but perhaps could not yet embrace. And while it may seem surprising, his arrival is less about him and more about you. For Sagittarius, life is always about movement, expansion, and truth. You are the archer, the one whose arrow is always pointed toward the horizon, seeking freedom and meaning. Yet even the archer must sometimes turn back, not to return to the past, but to retrieve the part of themselves they once left behind. This figure, this presence, is not destiny arriving to wound you again, but destiny placing a mirror before you, asking, "Do you see how much you've grown?" There is a story I once heard about a woman named Clara, a Sagittarius who had built a life filled with independence. She ran her own small business, raised 2 children, and loved to spend evenings sketching dreams she hoped one day to fulfill. Years before, a man had entered her life with such intensity that it seemed he would never leave. His departure shattered her. She thought she would never recover. But time passed and Clara learned to walk alone to steady her fire. Years later, when she no longer thought of him, he appeared at her door one evening, carrying nothing but the weight of old memories. Clara told me she did not tremble. Her heart did not break again. Instead, she realized that the very sight of him proved her strength, because she was no longer waiting, no longer hoping for a return. His presence was a punctuation mark, the final period at the end of a sentence she had already written. This is what Gate 1 means for you, Sagittarius. The one who approaches is not here to begin again, but to remind you that you are no longer the same person who once bent under the weight of unanswered promises. The home you live in is not simply walls and windows. It is the container of your transformation. Every cup of tea you brewed in solitude, every tear you wiped without a witness, every night you stared at the ceiling wondering if you were enough, all of that has built a sanctuary. And so when this figure appears, they are not stepping into your house. They are stepping into your frequency, your sacred energy that no longer bends or breaks. Astrologically, Sagittarius is ruled by Jupiter, the planet of wisdom, expansion, and destiny. Jupiter teaches us that nothing is wasted, not even heartbreak. Every experience is a seed for growth, and when someone from the past re-enters your orbit, it is Jupiter's way of saying, "See the garden you've cultivated from the ashes." In the 9th house, which Sagittarius naturally rules, there is always a call for higher truth. And sometimes the higher truth cannot be reached until the past reappears, not to reclaim you, but to confirm you've outgrown it. Think of the times you sat with yourself in silence. Remember the nights you thought you could not go on, yet you did. You stayed. You learned to carry yourself. Those nights were not meaningless. They were shaping you into the woman or man who no longer needs validation from someone who once left. So when the tall man comes, you may feel your heart quicken. Old fear may surface, whispering, "Will I fall again?" But no, Sagittarius. You will remember that the person who opens the door now is not the same soul who once begged to be seen. You are no longer the one waiting at the window. You are the one who has learned to light your own fire when the night grows cold. Some might ask, why does the universe bring back what we no longer desire? The answer is simple yet profound. Because closure is not a single act, it is a living process. And sometimes the last step of closure requires a witness. Not for them but for you. The presence of this figure is not to rekindle a love story, but to mark the end of your waiting, the end of your self-doubt, the end of your hidden fear that you would always be left behind. It is as if life itself is saying, here is the old shadow, but notice, you are no longer afraid of the dark. I remember another story, this time of Jonathan, a Sagittarius man in his 50s who had spent decades building a life as a freelancer, moving from city to city, always chasing new projects and dreams. Years earlier he had been deeply in love, but the relationship collapsed under the weight of unmet expectations. For years he thought himself a failure in love. Yet when his old partner appeared at his workplace years later, he did not feel anger or longing, only gratitude. Gratitude that he had survived. Gratitude that he had become someone whole without that love. He told me, when she walked in I realized she was no longer the one who left, and I was no longer the one who was abandoned. We were simply two souls who had outgrown what once was. And in that moment I knew my heart was free. Sagittarius, that is your lesson here. This figure, this tall man, is not your destiny but your closure. He is not a new beginning but the final confirmation that you are already walking your true path. When he enters, do not see him as the one who defines you. See him as the one who proves you are defined by no one but yourself. He is the punctuation, not the sentence. He is the visitor, not the home. So take this moment not with fear but with calm. You do not need an apology, an explanation, or a promise. You no longer shrink to fit a world that does not honor you. You only need to stand tall, look with gentle eyes and let your presence speak. For the one who is approaching is not here to stay. They are here to reveal to you that you have already stayed with yourself. And that, Sagittarius, is the truest form of destiny. Gate 2. Sagittarius, let us step deeper. If Gate 1 was the realization that someone returns not to reopen an old story, but to close a lingering chapter, then Gate 2 asks you to look beyond the figure of this person, and into the deeper meaning of why they appear inside your sacred space. For you, the house you live in is more than four walls. It is the mirror of your soul's journey. Every Sagittarius, though restless and yearning for wide horizons, has a sacred place within that anchors their freedom. This return is not random. It is the universe using your home, your sanctuary, to reveal to you that you have already transformed the soil of your life into something sacred. Think about it. Your kitchen, once filled with silence and unanswered prayers, has become a place of nourishment where you brew your tea not for someone else, but for yourself. Your bedroom, once soaked in tears of longing, has become the temple where you lay your hand on your chest each night and whisper gratitude for surviving another day. The living room, once a place of waiting, now vibrates with the laughter of your own resilience, the sound of your own presence. Sagittarius, this is not coincidence. It is spiritual architecture. The home you inhabit is now an extension of your soul, and when someone from the past steps into it, they are not just entering your physical space. They are stepping into the temple you have rebuilt from ashes. Astrology teaches us that Sagittarius is always searching for meaning, often traveling, exploring, learning, and expanding. Yet, paradoxically, it is often within the quiet space of home that the most profound spiritual expansion occurs. Jupiter, your ruling planet, reminds us that true growth is not just about crossing oceans or chasing stars, but about turning inward and finding that the entire cosmos already lives inside of you. When the tall man enters your home, it is a sacred ritual. He comes as a messenger, not of romance but of realization. He is there to acknowledge, whether consciously or not, that the woman or man he once knew is gone, and in their place stands someone radiant, rooted, and whole. I recall the story of Maria, another Sagittarius woman who once confessed to me that her home felt like a prison after a painful separation. For months, she avoided her kitchen because it reminded her of dinners once shared. She closed her bedroom windows because the light reminded her of mornings that no longer belonged to her. Yet slowly, with patience and courage, she began to reclaim her space. She painted her living room walls a bright color that reflected her fiery Sagittarian spirit. She filled her shelves with books on philosophy and spirituality, subjects that spoke to her endless quest for truth. She began to dance alone in her kitchen at night, reclaiming joy in the very place that once held grief. And when years later her former partner came by to return something he had kept, Maria realized she felt no bitterness. Her home was no longer a reminder of him. It was a reflection of her. He had walked into a temple he had no claim over, and she knew he was just a passerby, a shadow passing through a field of light. This is the message for you, Sagittarius. Your home is no longer the echo of waiting. It is a sanctuary born from resilience. That is why the universe sends this figure to your doorstep, not to reawaken old wounds, but to show you how sacred your inner temple has become. Sometimes closure is not found in words but in energy. When someone steps into your home and realizes they no longer recognize it, it is because you have transformed. They may search for the woman who once cried at midnight, or the man who once sat waiting for a knock that never came, but she or he is gone. In their place is a Sagittarian soul who has walked through fire and come out as light. In spiritual teachings, they say the home reflects the soul. A cluttered house often reflects an unsettled spirit. A cleansed space mirrors clarity and peace. For Sagittarius, who is often drawn to adventure outside, the home is the final frontier. It is the place where you must face yourself without distraction. And you have done so. Every small act, washing your dishes with care, lighting a candle not for romance but for prayer, sitting by the window not to wait but to breathe, has been a sacred act of reclamation. So when the past returns in physical form, stepping into your space, they are unknowingly stepping into a shrine they cannot disturb. I want you to imagine this vividly. The tall man stands at your doorway. Once you would have rushed to make the space comfortable for him, tidied the cushions, prepared tea, softened your presence to make him stay. But now you open the door not with trembling but with stillness. You do not change the space for him. The space already belongs to you. He may look around, searching for the echoes of what he once knew, but all he finds is light. All he feels is a presence that is calm, unmovable, free. And in that moment, you realize that your healing has turned your home into a living testimony of your soul's rebirth. This is the profound truth of Gate 2. The return does not happen in a marketplace or a cafe or a crowded street. It happens within the walls of your home, because the universe wants you to understand that you no longer need to leave yourself to be whole. Sagittarius, your adventures, your searching, your endless journeys have led you not to faraway lands but to this place, your own sanctuary. And here you are no longer incomplete. You are no longer waiting. You are no longer diminished by absence. You are whole. So when the past enters your home, remember this. Not everyone who knocks deserves entry. Not everyone who once knew your name deserves to stay. Some people return only as witnesses, not as companions. They are here to confirm that the house you live in, and the soul you inhabit, is no longer a place of longing but a temple of freedom. And from now on, Sagittarius, only those who honor this sacredness may be welcomed. The rest are simply passing shadows, reminders of how brightly you now burn. Gate 3. Sagittarius, by now you understand that the one who returns does not come to reopen a story, but to allow you to see yourself in a mirror you never asked for. In Gate 1 you recognize the return as closure, and in Gate 2 you discovered that your home, the sacred ground you rebuilt, was chosen as the stage of this encounter because it reflects your transformation. But Gate 3 is where the question arises. Why now? Why at this particular moment in your journey, when you had finally stopped waiting, when your soul had learned to thrive in stillness, does destiny place this figure before you? The answer lies in timing, Sagittarius. Astrology reminds us that life is not random. Jupiter, your ruling planet, is the great teacher of cycles, expansion, and divine timing. It doesn't simply bless you with opportunities. It aligns events with the exact moment your soul is ready to grasp their meaning. When someone from your past returns, it is not their decision alone. It is the alignment of cosmic patterns with the ripeness of your soul. This moment has arrived not to confuse you, but to affirm that you are no longer living in the frequency of longing. You are now living in the frequency of wholeness, and that shift must be acknowledged. Consider the story of Lisa, a Sagittarius who once carried deep wounds from an old love. For years she felt haunted by the silence of someone who walked away without explanation. She poured herself into work, friendships, even travel, but beneath it all, the wound remained like a quiet ache. Then one day, out of nowhere, that person reappeared in her life. Not to declare love, not to stay, but simply to say a few words that held no weight. At first her heart trembled, afraid the old ache would surface again. But as she stood there listening, she realized she felt nothing but peace. What had once been unbearable had become irrelevant. She didn't need closure from him. She had already closed the chapter herself. His return was merely a confirmation of her own growth. This is the essence of what is unfolding for you, Sagittarius. The universe does not waste moments. The return of the tall figure is not about him at all. It is about you. It is about you standing still in the presence of what once shattered you, and realizing you are no longer breakable. It is about you seeing clearly that you do not need apologies, explanations, or promises. Your worth has never been defined by someone's absence. It has been defined by your resilience, your fire, your choice to keep walking even in the dark. Sagittarius, you are the sign of vision, of truth-seeking. You are often described as the archer, bow drawn, eyes fixed on distant horizons. But this moment is not about shooting arrows outward. It is about looking inward and recognizing that the true destination of your arrow has always been yourself. The tall man's reappearance is the final mirror, showing you that you have already reached the destination you sought through countless journeys. You are your own horizon now. Some of you may ask, but why did he come back if not to stay? The answer is simple. Because energy demands balance. An unclosed chapter leaves vibrations lingering, like unfinished notes in a song. And when your soul becomes strong enough, the universe will bring back the old frequency, not to trap you in it, but so you can see with clarity that you no longer resonate with it. You have moved on. He has returned not because you called him, but because your soul no longer holds him. And paradoxically, that release summoned him, not as a reunion but as a witness to your freedom. Imagine this clearly. You are sitting in your living room, your sacred space of peace, when suddenly the past appears at your door. Once, this would have sent your heart racing, your thoughts spiraling, your hope rekindling. But now, as he stands there, you notice the quiet inside you. You hear the sound of your own breath, steady and calm. You see the walls you painted, the candles you lit, the books you've read, the laughter you've created in solitude. And in that moment, you realize the return is not about him. It is about you seeing your own life reflected back to you. You have become your own steady flame. This is why the timing is sacred. Sagittarius, your soul has reached a point where the universe no longer tests you through longing. Instead, it confirms your transformation through presence. This person is the punctuation mark at the end of a chapter that once consumed you. And now, with grace, you are ready to write a new chapter free from the echoes of old pain. Astrologically, this moment reflects the lesson of Saturn as well, the planet of karma and responsibility. For Sagittarians, Saturn's influence often feels heavy because it asks you to slow down, to root deeply instead of chasing the next horizon. But it is precisely this slowing down that allows you to see the truth. You don't need to keep running. You are already enough here now in this space. The reappearance of the past is not a karmic trap. It is Saturn's quiet nod, saying, lesson complete. And so, Sagittarius, Gate 3 is about trust. Trusting the timing of your life. Trusting that what returns does not return to hurt you but to reveal you. Trusting that you no longer need to hold on to the version of yourself that waited, begged, or hoped. You are not that person anymore. You are the archer who now points the arrow inward, knowing that the truest adventure is discovering the infinite within. So when the past knocks, open the door with grace, but know this. You are not opening it for them. You are opening it for yourself, to let the universe show you just how far you have come. That is the gift of timing, the miracle of this encounter. Not a new beginning with them, but a profound beginning with yourself. Gate 4. Sagittarius, by the time you arrive at Gate 4, something extraordinary happens. You begin to see that the tall man who stands before you is not a symbol of unfinished love or lingering pain, but a messenger of release. His presence is not the storm you once feared, but the calm after it. And more importantly, it is not about him at all. It is about the sanctuary you have built, the strength you embody, and the freedom you now claim as your own. This is the gate of liberation. Liberation does not always arrive with fire and lightning. Sometimes it arrives quietly, in the form of someone who once shattered you standing in your presence and realizing they no longer have power here. And for you, Sagittarius, liberation is not simply about being free from another person. It is about becoming free from the version of yourself that once needed them. I want you to imagine this scene clearly. You open the door and there he is, tall, familiar. A ghost you once prayed would return. But instead of trembling, you smile softly. Instead of shrinking, you stand tall. Instead of waiting for words, you feel no need for them. Because deep inside, you know the truth. You have already said goodbye. You said it in every silent night you endured alone. You said it in every choice to honor yourself. You said it when you stopped checking your phone, when you stopped making excuses for someone's absence, when you stopped hoping the past would become the future. The goodbye was never spoken to him. It was spoken within you. And now, in Gate 4, the universe confirms it. Sagittarius, liberation for you often looks like movement. Packing your bags, booking a flight, chasing the next adventure. But this liberation is different. This is the freedom that happens without leaving your living room. It is the freedom that takes place in the stillness of your own soul. When you realize you are no longer chained to someone's silence. The true adventure is no longer out there. It is here within you. Let me share with you Maria's story. Another Sagittarius who once thought she could only find freedom by running far away. When her first love left without explanation, she booked trips across the world, searching for distractions in the beauty of distant landscapes. But no matter how far she went, the ache followed. Then one day, years later, she met him again, by chance at a bookstore in her own city. And for the first time she felt no ache. She felt gratitude, peace, even compassion. It wasn't because he changed. It was because she had. That day, she realized she didn't need to escape anymore. The freedom she longed for wasn't in another country. It was in her own chest. That is the essence of Gate 4, Sagittarius. The tall man's return is not meant to reopen wounds, but to prove that the wounds have healed. To show you that you are no longer the same woman who once wept at midnight, waiting for a text that never came. You are no longer the one who questioned her worth because someone couldn't stay. You are no longer the one who begged for closure from someone who was incapable of giving it. You are now the woman who has closed the door with her own hands, whose self-respect shines brighter than any apology could. In astrology, this moment resonates with Pluto, the planet of transformation, endings, and rebirth. Pluto asks you to confront the shadows, to face the very thing you fear most, and to rise from it renewed. For Sagittarius, Pluto's lesson is often about truth. The truth of what you need, the truth of what you deserve, and the truth of what you will no longer tolerate. And here the truth is simple. The tall man did not come to define you. He came so you could see yourself fully defined without him. Sagittarius, you thrive on meaning. You want to know why things happen, why people enter and exit, why destiny seems to circle back. But Gate 4 teaches you that not every return is meant to be explained. Some returns are simply symbols. And the meaning here is clear: you are free. Not free because someone stayed, but free because you no longer need them to. That is the highest form of liberation. To no longer be dependent on someone else's choice for your happiness. This liberation is not loud. It is not about proving anything, not about showing him how strong you are, not about reclaiming power through pride. No, Sagittarius, this liberation is soft. It is quiet. It is the smile on your face when you realize you no longer ache. It is the peace in your chest when you see him and feel nothing but clarity. It is the strength in your spine when you stand tall and know you are whole. And what happens next? Perhaps he speaks. Perhaps he apologizes. Perhaps he even asks for another chance. But the truth is, it doesn't matter. Because Gate 4 is not about his words or actions. It is about your response, the calm, steady, sovereign response of someone who has already chosen herself. Whether he stays or leaves again, it makes no difference. The story is already complete. So Sagittarius, here at Gate 4 you reclaim your power. Not the power to change someone else, not the power to rewrite the past, but the power to stand in your present with full dignity. You understand now that the return of the tall man was never the ending you feared, nor the beginning you once longed for. It was simply the signpost marking your freedom. And this freedom is not the end of your journey. It is the beginning of the truest one. Because when you are no longer chained to the past, your arrow can finally point toward the future. And the future, Sagittarius, is brighter than you've ever dared to imagine. Conclusion. Sagittarius, as we arrive at the conclusion of this journey, take a deep breath and notice how far you have come. The tall man who appeared at your door was never truly about him. It was always about you. about the fire you carried through the darkest nights, the wisdom you gathered from heartbreak, the freedom you found in the stillness of your own soul. This story has never been about waiting for someone to return. It has always been about your return, to yourself, to your truth, to the unshakable light within you. The arrow of Sagittarius is not meant to stay pointed at the past. It is meant to soar toward the horizon, carrying hope, vision, and meaning. And now, because you have released what once weighed you down, that arrow is lighter than ever before. You are no longer bound by the silence of someone who could not love you the way you needed. You are no longer waiting by a window for footsteps that never arrive. You are standing tall in your own home, in your own heart, fully alive, fully free. And that is the gift the universe wanted you to see. That healing was never about someone else returning. It was about you never abandoning yourself again. The Sagittarius spirit thrives when it trusts its own truth, when it believes in the promise of tomorrow, when it dares to keep walking with courage, even after the past has fallen away. So as you step forward from this chapter, carry with you the quiet knowing that you are whole. You are not waiting anymore. You are already on the journey, and the horizon has never looked so radiant. If these words touched you, dear Sagittarius, I invite you to like, share, and subscribe, so we can continue walking together in the light of wisdom and healing. Your story is not over, it is only beginning.